In Dubai, Beckham begins light training under the ever-present gaze of the world's media. James Sarr continues his daily journey to work in Tunbridge Wells, and the prospect of 12-hour days sat behind his desk. Every professional footballer strives for a body fit for his sport, but for the oddest reasons, injury sometimes lets it down. Ryan Giggs had the Manchester United medical team baffled for weeks.
Ryan Giggs, the Manchester United forward, had a niggling back injury for some time. Couldn't quite work it out, and the physios were looking at it. He went to a chiropractor. His training routine was changed. Nobody could work out what it was until finally some sort of aerodynamic boffin got involved, a specialist who discovered that his driving position in his new Ferrari was all wrong, and this had put his back out.
But perhaps the strangest injury happened in 1970, when the Brentford goalkeeper Chick Brodie was stretchered off after a vicious tackle from a dog. While the tackle that injured Beckham was serious enough to put him out of action for nearly 2 months, others are less fortunate. When Coventry City defender David Buist was tackled on April the 8th, 1996, it destroyed his playing career.
We had a corner. I always come in at the far post, and I had a stab at the ball, which I connected with, and then I got hit either side. This sort of block tackle from Dennis Irwin and Brian McClare. I had a sense of something was missing, something wasn't where it should be. I knew I'd broke my leg straight away.
David Buist had a double fracture to his right leg.
People just sort of looked in sort of, not horror, but, you know, like shocked at what they were looking at. I mean, I wouldn't look down because I didn't want to move. I was just froze, sort of looking up, lying on the side, looking upwards. And then one of the players sort of came and held my hand and, you know, telling me don't worry. And then, you know, that there's, if that's happening, then, you know, you got something to be worried about.
The fracture was so bad, the bone pierced the skin. For 2 years, David Buist struggled to overcome his injury, but after 14 operations, he retired from the game. Today, he manages Solihull.
My outlook on life has always been a positive one, and I came into football late, so I knew it was going to be a short career anyway for me. I was 24 when I came in, so even in the best case scenario, I'd be finished by 35, and that's, you know, playing down in the lower divisions.
Lilleshall National Sports Centre in the West Midlands is one of Britain's most prestigious sports clinics. Here, the application of science to sport is paramount. Since 1988, they've successfully treated over 2,000 footballers, including Alan Shearer and Sol Campbell, for serious long-term injuries. The pressures on club resources to keep players fit means often only the richest teams can afford to look after squad members who are out of action for weeks or even months.
So what we say to clubs is, we'll take those players off your hands, we'll bring them to Lilleshall, and we will put them on a very specialised programme of individual rehabilitation, where they work in small groups with a physiotherapist looking after them, prescribing them exercise programmes, and treating their injury so that they get back to full functional fitness, not necessarily any quicker than they may otherwise have done, but what we can guarantee is that they will be back to fitness very effectively and very efficiently, so that there is a very low chance, hopefully, of their injury reoccurring once they go back into full playing.
Psychology is another science taken seriously in today's football world. Lilleshall has pioneered this approach, as many players with long-term injuries feel isolated from their regular teammates.
What we attempt to do here at Lilleshall is almost create a critical mass of those individuals who are in a similar situation. And by bringing them together, I think psychologically that has a major benefit for them. They can see that they're not alone. There are other players, other colleagues in the world of football who've got similar problems, and by rehabilitating them together, both physically and mentally, we can see great improvements in their overall performance.
Before he left England, David Beckham admitted that because he'd not been able to continue with his regular fitness regime, he'd put on 5 pounds in weight. In Dubai, he's been undergoing long hours in the gym to bring himself to match fitness. This regime will also serve to speed his recovery. James Sarr is not a professional athlete. He plays football only once a week and spends much of his day working at his desk. Historically, science has been treated with disdain in British football.
I think in the past the person involved in treating injuries at a football club was known as the trainer. It was probably somebody who was an ex-player who'd ended his playing days, become a bucket and sponge man who'd looked after the fitness of the players and was involved in really just trying to treat them afterwards. So he would just base it on what had happened to him in the past, a few sort of old wives' tales, and know that ultimately the body will heal. It'll heal itself given time. What you could never guarantee was whether that healing would enable the player to go out and perform at the highest level again once the injury had finally got better.
But there was also something else about football in that it was a very macho sport. It was a place where you were naturally suspicious of medical people, and also you didn't want to complain too much. If you did complain about niggles and tweaks, you were a prima donna and you didn't want to play for the team. And people would actually hide injuries rather than admit to them for fear that they would lose their place in the team. So everything conspired against proper medicine.
Sports scientists have shown clubs that the quick fix treatment of old, such as cortisone injections, is the worst way to treat their players. Cortisone, a pain-killing drug, was used to suppress inflammation in the short term, enabling players to continue with their game. But in the long term, it destroyed tissue, softened cartilage, and inhibited the speed of recovery.
We'll get this sorted out.
What we've had over the years is not just an education of the coach. The manager himself has now become much more aware of the fact that trying to get players back quickly, injecting them with cortisone, forcing the physiotherapist to make them available for Saturday is not necessarily the best long-term option. I think we have managers, coaches and physiotherapists who are very, very aware that getting players fit for the long term, getting them back to full functional rehabilitation is the much better way, much more cost-effective way really, of getting players back to full fitness.
One man who's had a dramatic effect on British football and who understands better than most the value of science to the game is a Frenchman, Arsène Wenger. His is an holistic approach.
The influence of Arsène Wenger, the Arsenal manager, has been huge on English football because he came over and quite obviously transformed a club by his methodology and made it successful. So people started studying what he had actually done. And a lot of what he had done is to do with medical preparation. It's about making sure that people are looked after before, during and after games.
Wenger also made players realise that their life away from the pitch was as important as their 90 minutes on it.
Wenger was vitally important because he realised that diet was central, that there was far too much alcohol in English football, which has been a perennial problem. Lots of people have talked about it. He did something about it. He got rid of it. He got rid of drinking. He made players understand that they were reducing their earning potential. He realised that if he could hit them in the pocket, they would work it out for themselves.
What Wenger and others like him found in Britain was a game whose habits had changed little in 30 years.
Well, in the 70s, they used to go down like flies in the cup final from exhaustion. And it was a very simple cause. They weren't properly hydrated. They just didn't have enough liquid going into the system. They wouldn't have proper drinking and they wouldn't drink the right kind of stuff. They probably had had a couple of pints the night before and they just weren't prepared. If you talk to old players, talk to the guys who went through the so-called glorious 70s, they'd arrive from the bookies about 10 to 3, get changed, wander out and start playing football.
Today's footballers are far more conscious of what they eat. Top teams have their own nutritionists and dietitians. A few years ago, it wasn't uncommon for managers to insist that before a match their players eat steak and chips. The England 2002 squad will eat